By the end of her first week, Mama Ronke felt like a character in a transformation advert. The same women who used to gossip about her hips were now trailing her like fans after a celebrity. Ronke, your waist is snatched. Oh, you sure say you'd never relocate to Lekki for small surgery? You dey glow like person where they collect foreign vitamin. Her tailor shop that once echoed with only the sound of her sewing machine now buzzed with activity. Clients, new and old, trooped in daily. Some came for gowns, others came for gossip. Most came out of curiosity. And then there were the whispers. Whispers that had changed in tone. Before it was, her hips be like trailer. Now it was, she fine die. I go try whatever she to use. Ronke, of course, smiled graciously. The kind of smile only a woman who had suffered ridicule could wear. Part pride, part victory, part silent. I told you so. But behind that smile was something else. Something she didn't speak of. Not even to Morali, her apprentice. Every night since she started using the wrapper, her sleep had become a battlefield. What used to be sweet, drooling rest had turned into hours of tossing, strange noises and dreams that felt like warnings. It always began the same way. The room would go silent, too silent. Even the wall clock seemed to stop ticking. Then, just as she'd begin to drift, she would hear it, a whisper. You are fading. She'd open her eyes and see nothing but darkness. But in her dreams, always without fail, stood a shadowy woman, faceless, still, watching. Sometimes the woman stood beside her mirror, sometimes by her wardrobe. One night the figure sat at the foot of her bed, brushing her own hair even though she had no head. Other times the voice whispered into her ears, some weights are sacred. This beauty is borrowed. You're not the owner of this body. Each time Ronke woke, the wrapper would be tighter, coiling around her waist like a living thing. At first she thought it was imagination, but then she started noticing other signs. It was a bright Sunday afternoon, the kind where everything in Lagos looked golden and loud. The horns on the street blasted like trumpet practice gone wrong. Children ran up and down in slippers too big for their feet, and Ronke's neighbor's generator roared like it was fighting the PHCN gods. But inside Ronke's room, peace reigned. She stood in front of her full-length mirror in her hallway, adjusting the sleeves of her sky-blue lace blouse. The blouse clung to her new, smaller frame like sugar sticks to Puff Puff. It had taken her only 25 minutes to zip it up, 10 less than usual. Progress. Her new wrapper, a matching blue and silver ankara, was tied firmly. Her jewel rose high like a royal turban, and her makeup was simple but sharp. As she reached for her earrings, a tiny smile crept across her lips. Ronke the market tailor, see your glow, now you day live life, she whispered to herself, tilting her head side to side to admire the sharpness of her jawline. She stepped back from the mirror and turned sideways. Her hips looked rounder, her waist looked slimmer, her chest just enough to confuse and command respect. Gotta beg, who would have thought I fit enter this blouse again? She said with a giggle, posing like a beauty queen on her own runway. But then, something odd happened. As she turned slightly to grab her earrings from the dressing table beside the mirror, she noticed a flicker, a small delay. She blinked once. Her reflection blinked a second later. Ronke paused. She squinted. Did I just... She raised her hand slowly. Her reflection raised it too, but slightly off-beat, just a heartbeat late. She frowned. She tried it again. This time, both hands. 1, 2. Her reflection followed, but again, not quite in sync. Jesus, she muttered, her pulse suddenly rising. She leaned forward and stared directly into the mirror. Her reflection did the same. But something felt wrong. It wasn't just the timing, it was the eyes. The woman in the mirror, who looked exactly like her, had the same face, same smile, same wrapper. But her eyes were too calm, too hollow, like they were watching her, not reflecting her. Then her reflection smiled, but Ronki didn't. Her body froze. Her lips parted in disbelief. The reflection still smiled, and then, almost playfully, tilted her head in the opposite direction. Ronki gasped and stumbled backward, hitting the edge of her bed. Blood of Jesus! Ah! She scrambled to her feet, heart thudding like a drum in a masquerade dance. She turned and looked again. The mirror was normal. Everything was in place. Her reflection now moved with her again, perfectly in sync. She stood still, breathing hard, chest rising and falling. Maybe I'm tired, she whispered, or maybe hunger dawn entered my head. She touched her forehead. It was clammy. Her fingers were trembling. Just then, her phone buzzed. A WhatsApp message from a client. Auntie Ronke, the gown's sweet die-o. I want snap you for Instagram today. Beg glam up. Ronke looked at the mirror again. Her heart still beat fast, but her expression softened. She forced a smile. After all, she looked beautiful, didn't she? She grabbed her phone and posed, hips out, head tilted, a hand resting on her waist. Click. The photo looked amazing, but when she zoomed in later, the edge of the mirror showed something odd. A faint, shadowy hand resting on her shoulder, one that wasn't hers. By her third week of using the wrapper of glory, Ronki had become an unofficial celebrity in Alagbaka. Gone were the snide remarks and muttered insults. Now people whispered her name like a secret they wanted to possess. Shop owners greeted her like a local dignitary. Even the Agboro at the junction, who never respected anybody, nodded respectfully as she walked past. Fine, auntie. Your waist be like bottle. God create you on Sunday. One hawker shouted as she passed, carrying her measuring tape and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her shop was always full. Clients didn't just come for dresses anymore. They came for the secret. And Ronki? She gave vague answers. Just natural herbs, discipline, and focus. She would smile and point at the quote she had painted on her shop wall. What you don't sweat out, you tie out. People would laugh. They loved her energy. But inside, Ronki was running on fumes. She could no longer sleep deeply. She barely ate. She hadn't felt true hunger in days, not even after skipping meals. Food had started tasting wrong. Her usual Sunday favorite, jollof rice with dodo and fried chicken, tasted like ash soaked in perfume. Even water had started to taste bitter. Her mood flipped unpredictably. One moment, she would be humming to Simi's songs while sewing. The next, she'd snap at Marie for threading a needle too slowly. Do you think this is a tailoring school or a funeral home? She snapped one afternoon. The poor girl looked up, confused. Auntie, I know. Then work like your life depends on it. She regretted it almost instantly, but pride kept her from apologizing. Instead, she turned back to her sewing machine, pressed her lips together, and let her foot pedal the tension away. Runk's body had always been her pride and her shame, a masterpiece and a battlefield all in one. But now it was becoming a stranger. It didn't matter how many compliments she got or how many clients took secret photos of her for inspiration. Deep inside, her body had started whispering something different, not with words, but with warning signs. And though she was glowing on the outside, her body knew something was wrong. It began with her knees. One afternoon, she was climbing the short staircase into her shop, only 4 steps. But by the 3rd step, her knees wobbled like warm moi-moi. She paused, pretending to adjust her wrapper, but really she was buying time, trying to breathe, trying not to collapse. "Na so life day go?" she muttered, forcing a smile as a customer approached. Inside, her thighs throbbed. Her calves ached. She sat down quickly the moment she entered, pretending to reach for something under the table. Then came her back. She noticed it while bending to trace chalk marks on a lace fabric laid out on the floor. Just one bend, and her spine screamed in protest. It felt like someone stuck a knife at the small of her back and twisted. She stood up too fast and nearly blacked out. The pain spread from her waist up to her neck, pulsing like a warning drum inside her bones. But she said nothing. She pushed through. After all, who complains when their waist is finally snatched? Her eyes betrayed her next. Bright lights made her squint. The sun felt hotter than usual, even when others around her said it was just warm. Street lights at night blurred into glowing orbs. She rubbed her eyes constantly, blaming it on dust. One day she stared at her phone screen and the text blurred for a second. "I just need rest," she told herself. But she couldn't rest, because the rapper was now part of her routine, part of her success, part of her identity. She stopped laughing like she used to. Her jokes, once loud and foolish, became polite smiles. Her shoulders, once relaxed, stayed stiff even in her sleep. Even when she walked, she noticed she had to consciously remind herself to swing her arms, to move her body like she used to. It was like her natural rhythm had been drained. She went to deliver a finished outfit at Madame Veronica's house in Ijepo Estate. It was a stunning emerald green lace gown, sewn with love and laced with exhaustion. As she stepped inside the gate, she staggered slightly. The client noticed. "Auntie Ronki, you okay?" Veronica asked. Ronki smiled tightly. "Ah, I day, just small tiredness." Veronica raised her brow. "Your eyes look heavy. You sure say you to eat?" Ronk laughed. "Too much food, they make persons slow. I wouldn't keep this my new body sharp. They laughed, but the laughter was hollow. As soon as Runky entered her keek back home, she slumped slightly to one side. Her neck tilted, her vision swam, and her chest tightened for a few seconds. The Kika driver looked through the mirror. "Auntie, you dey all right?" She straightened up quickly. "I dey yare." Na breeze, but her hands trembled the rest of the way. Before the wrapper, Ronk's skin was one of her proudest features. Smooth, cocoa-toned, and naturally radiant. No filter needed. She used to joke that her glow came from palm oil and confidence. Clients often asked what cream she used, and she'd laugh and say, "My own come from inside. No mixture, no wahala." But now her mirror told a different story. Her glow had started to dim, slowly, almost politely, like it didn't want to alarm her at first. It began with her elbows. They became unusually dry, not just the usual ashiness from harmattan, but deep, flaky patches that no amount of shea butter could soothe. She rubbed Vaseline. She tried baby oil. She even mixed coconut oil and honey. Nothing worked. Instead, the skin grew duller, grayer. Next was her neck. She noticed it while applying foundation one morning before heading to deliver a blouse in Okiaro. As she used her sponge, she paused. There was a faint line, a dark crease circling her neck, like something had been wrapped around it too tightly for too long, like a mark from invisible bondage. She tried to scrub it off. Nothing changed. "Maybe it's just hyperpigmentation," she told herself, though her hands trembled slightly. She switched creams. She started exfoliating. The mark darkened. Then came her stomach. Not the shape. She was still shrinking. That was the only part that made sense. But the skin around her navel had developed tiny, scaly lines. Thin, like cracks on old leather. She rubbed and rubbed. She even tried a body mask she saw on Instagram made from turmeric and pawpaw, but the patches remained. Worse, they began to itch at night, right after she tied the wrapper. By morning, the itching would stop, but the skin would feel tight, like it had been stretched and pulled during her sleep. Her hands also began to tell a story. Her knuckles darkened. Her palms looked like they had been soaked in salt. Even her fingernails started to chip at the edges, something that had never happened before. She showed Morelli one afternoon, trying to joke. "See these my fingers? Dem dey protest the work way I dey do." But Morelli wasn't laughing. "Auntie, your hand be like my grandma own. You know day rest at all?" Ronky smiled tightly. "Not too much needle and measuring tape." She turned away before the girl could see the panic in her eyes. because deep down she knew this was not normal. At first it was small, insignificant, easy to ignore. A few white flakes on her shoulder after her evening bath. Runke thought it was maybe the soap or the hard water from the tap. She shrugged it off, wiped her skin with shea butter, and went about her business. But the next day, after taking off her blouse, the flakes were back. This time they had spread. Tiny curls of dry skin clung to her shoulders, to her upper arms, to the small of her back. Like invisible hands had been gently scraping her overnight. She rubbed her arm. The flakes came off like powder. She scratched a little. The itch was deep, not on the surface, but underneath the skin, where fingers couldn't reach. Still, she said nothing. Just dry skin. Maybe weather. Maybe dehydration. Let me increase my water intake, she told herself. She drank 5 sachets of pure water that night before bed, but by morning, her skin had begun to peel. She discovered it properly one morning while getting dressed to meet a customer in Owena. She was admiring herself in the mirror, as usual. The wrapper had done its job. Her waist looked sharp. Her collarbone stood like it wanted to speak. Her gown zipped up without resistance. She smiled. Then she turned to the side and paused. Right there, near her ribs, was a small, peeled patch, red and raw like the skin of a yam after you scrape it. She moved closer to the mirror. There was another one, just under her arm. She slowly lifted her blouse and turned her back toward the mirror. And what she saw made her knees buckle. Her back looked like the wrapper had started to etch itself into her. There were faint red marks, shaped like curls and spirals, the exact design sewn into the wrapper's fabric. They weren't printed. They were burned in. She reached out to touch them and winced. The spots were hot, tender. And when she rubbed her palm against her skin, the dry layer flaked off, soft like powdered paper. It left behind a tight, shiny surface underneath, almost like new skin struggling to breathe. By the 4th night, it wasn't just a tickle or a nuisance. It was a full-blown war beneath her skin. It always began 30 minutes after she tied the wrapper. It would start in her thighs, then crawl up her spine, then her arms, her shoulders, her stomach. She scratched and scratched, until her nails had grooves of dry skin under them. Still, she didn't stop. Sometimes she bled lightly. Sometimes she used a cold towel or palm oil. Nothing helped. Her skin felt like it was being peeled from the inside, as though the wrapper wasn't shrinking fat anymore, but skin, and maybe even her soul. One night after a warm bath, she wrapped herself in her pink towel. She didn't lotion immediately, just stood at the mirror, staring at her reflection, which now looked both stunning and sick. As she turned to reach for her cream, her towel slipped off, and she gasped. The inside of the towel was coated in white flakes, not ordinary skin ash. These were thick, curled, papery flakes, like the skin of a lizard during shedding season. She looked at the floor. More flakes had fallen around her feet. She stared at her reflection in disbelief. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away aggressively. No lie, it's just dryness. Maybe allergic reaction. Maybe. But even she didn't believe it anymore, because her skin wasn't dry. It was warning her, begging her, screaming, enough. That night she stared at the fabric. It lay on her bed like a sleeping beast. The red embroidered symbols glowed faintly under the moonlight, sneaking through her curtain. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She could almost hear a whisper, not from inside her head, but from the wrapper itself. One more night, just one more. She hesitated. Then, like a moth to flame, she tied it, tighter than ever. Her skin burned instantly, but she lay down anyway. And as she drifted into sleep, she scratched her arm softly, only to feel something peel under her fingernail. She looked. It was skin, heron. And yet, she smiled, Because by morning she would be slimmer. Because to the world she was glowing. To her clients she was a success story. To herself she was drowning in silence. Her skin was trying to scream, but she had already learned how to cover it with lace, makeup, and smiles. Until the day she couldn't, because skin doesn't lie. It doesn't gossip. It just speaks. And Ronki's skin, it was speaking in scars. It skipped a week, then two. Then she bled lightly for a day, then nothing. She panicked, took a pregnancy test. Negative. Maybe it's stress, she said aloud, trying to convince herself. But something inside her whispered, it's the wrapper. It's stealing more than fat. She tried to stop. She tried to skip just one night. But that night she had the worst dream yet. The faceless woman stood by her bed again, whispering, you are not the only one. More are coming, but not all will survive. Even her body knew, and soon the outside world would know too. Because Runk's body wasn't just speaking anymore, it was beginning to shout. How could she stop now? She was the before and after dream walking in flesh. She was proof that fat girls could fight back. Stopping now would be like admitting she had failed, like returning to being the punchline of every tomato seller's joke. Even her tailor friends had started secretly envying her. At a party, one of them whispered, I swear, if I don't get that wrapper by this weekend, I'll go and tie a rag around my waist. Anything to look like you. Another one said, if I knew slimming would bring customers, I for stop eating since January. They didn't see the way her hands trembled. They didn't know that she sometimes woke up gasping, her mouth dry like she had slept with cement in it. They couldn't hear the voices at night. They didn't see how her mirror sometimes reflected her movements late, or how the wrapper sometimes coiled itself tighter when she tried to remove it. One evening after closing her shop, Ronki sat on the floor of her room, wrapper loosely tied around her waist, sipping pap with no sugar. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Mama Ronka, her mother said on the line, how body? I saw your picture in our church WhatsApp group. Ah, my Pekin is now celebrity. Ronke forced a laugh. A small change, mummy. Just trying to stay healthy. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then in that voice only mothers can pull off, she asked, but are you well? Ronk's throat tightened. Of course, mummy. Why do you ask? Because your eyes. In the photo, they look tired. Like you're smiling, but you're not happy. Are you sure this slimming thing is not too much? Ronk closed her eyes. She wanted to say, Mummy, I'm scared. She wanted to say, something is not right. But instead she laughed and said, no, oh, I'd all right. No worry. It's the camera filter. They spoke for a few more minutes. After she hung up, she sat there in silence. The pap in her cup had gone cold. Her stomach rumbled, not from hunger, but from emptiness. That night she stood in front of her mirror, preparing to tie the wrapper as usual. The room was quiet. No fan, no music. She looked at herself, beautiful, slim, glowing. She tilted her head. Then her reflection did something strange again. It smiled before she did, not after. Before, like it was ahead of her, mocking her. She took a step back. Her reflection didn't. She blinked rapidly, stepped forward. The reflection followed this time. She sighed and chuckled nervously. Maybe I'm just tired, she whispered. She reached for the wrapper and tied it tighter than ever. That night, the voice didn't whisper. It screamed, Ronki, you are losing yourself. One night, after a long day of sewing and measuring bridesmaids for an upcoming wedding, Ronki tied the wrapper like she always did. Tight, firm, secure. She lay facing east as instructed, even placing her small rechargeable lamp beside her bed. But she couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, the kind of heat that clung to the skin like bad luck. She closed her eyes and tried to count backwards from 100. And then it started. First the whisper, then the chill, then the tightening. The wrapper began to press against her waist, tighter and tighter. as if someone invisible was pulling it from the ends, twisting it like rope. Ah, ah, Ronke cried out, sitting up. She tried to untie it, but her fingers wouldn't move. Her hands trembled. She reached for her rechargeable lamp. It had gone off. Total darkness. She looked up. The woman was back. This time she was standing right by the wall, and she was weeping blood. Ronke screamed, but her mouth made no sound. She began to cry. Hot, silent tears ran down her cheeks. Then the voice came again, louder this time. "You're losing more than fat, Ronka. You're losing your light." In a flash, Ronka passed out. Morning crept into Ronk's room slowly, like it wasn't sure if it was welcome. The cock in the next compound had already crowed, twice, but it sounded distant, like it was crowing from underwater. Ronk stirred. Her body felt heavy, like it had absorbed bricks in her sleep. Her bedsheet was damp with sweat. Her neck was stiff. Her back? It throbbed like it had been beaten with a pestle. And her waist, oh, her waist. It felt like a snake had spent the night coiled around her. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her side. Her head pulsed with a dull ache, as if her brain had been pounding against her skull all night. Her hands trembled as she reached for her rechargeable lamp. She flipped the switch. Nothing. "Nepa people again," she whispered, her voice raspy like someone who hadn't spoken in weeks. She slowly peeled off the wrapper. It didn't slide off. It unwound, like it was reluctantly letting go, like it had grown attached to her. Her skin underneath was red and marked. The symbols embroidered into the fabric had left actual impressions on her body, as if they had been branded. She touched one gently. It stung. She hissed and pulled her hand away. She staggered to her mirror, one hand on the wall, her legs unsure of the floor beneath them. Each step felt like betrayal. Her knees wobbled. Her balance was off. She finally reached the mirror and stood there, breathing heavily. She looked up, and what she saw made her freeze. Her belly was flat, her waist snatched. Her arms no longer had the soft roundness they used to. On the surface, perfection. But her eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark circles. Her lips had lost their usual rosy tint. Her cheeks looked hollow, as though someone had started carving her from the inside. She leaned closer. "Is this me?" She tilted her head to the left. Her reflection followed. But something felt off again. The timing, the vibe. The reflection looked more confident than she felt. More alive. Ronk stepped back. Her stomach turned. The mirror smiled. She didn't. Her heart jumped. She blinked. The mirror returned to normal. She shook her head quickly. "It's just sleep. I didn't sleep well. That's all." She picked up her powder, brushed some on her face, then paused. There were tiny flakes again. Skin. Her cheeks had started to peel, just like her shoulders. She dropped the powder. She picked up her wrapper and looked at it like it was a person. The red stitching at the edge seemed to shimmer in the daylight. For a brief moment, it looked like one of the threads moved, wiggled like a worm stretching. She blinked. Nothing. She folded it quickly and shoved it into her wardrobe. But as she closed the wardrobe door, she heard it, a faint hiss, short, sharp, low. No, I'm imagining things." She shook her head again and forced a laugh. "Ronke, hunger day worry you?" But deep inside she knew that wasn't her imagination. Ronke could barely stand upright, but the world didn't need to know that. Not her customers, not the market women, not the ones who used to laugh at her waist like it was a national stadium. Pain twisted in her lower back like a corkscrew, and her knees buckled slightly as she stood from the mirror. But she didn't sit back down. Number. She adjusted her wrapper, tied it neatly, and dragged out one of her finer blouses, the purple chiffon with silver embroidery. It was loose, flowing, and still whispered elegance. She slipped it on slowly, wincing as the sleeve brushed over one of the raw patches on her shoulder. The sting brought tears to her eyes, but she swallowed them, because the game wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about presentation. She applied powder with a trembling hand, a light touch of eyeshadow, just enough to make her eyes look awake, even though they'd barely closed all night. Mascara, lip gloss, the bright wine red one, the one she wore when she needed to command attention. Then she picked up her phone, took a selfie. She tilted her head, forced a smile. The screen froze for a second, almost like it was hesitating. She took the shot anyway and looked at it. She looked stunning, flawless, sharp jawline, clean cheekbones, neck like a queen in a Nollywood epic. She posted it on her WhatsApp status immediately. Fresh like new Gary, glory loading, waste for days. Within minutes, replies started rolling in. Auntie Ronka, you too fine. C-shape. Omo, share your pluggo. Lepa queen, no only you waka come. God when, she smiled, but her thumb shook as she replied to the first comment with, na God oh. She grabbed her bag, the same one she had been using since 2020. The leather was cracked, but the straps were still strong. She slung it over her shoulder and stepped outside. The air was warm. The sun was just beginning to stretch across the sky. It painted the rooftops golden and made the dust on the street look like glitter. A small girl from the next compound waved at her. Auntie Ronki, good morning. She waved back with a wide smile. Good morning, my sweetie. Inside, her chest tightened. She took slow, measured steps down the street, head held high, wrapper swaying with each step like she was walking a fashion runway. Two Okada men paused and stared. Ah, see figure 8, one said. God bless whoever they enjoy this shape, the other added. She chuckled softly. Not out of pride, but from exhaustion, because every compliment felt like a pin poking a balloon already on the edge of bursting. By the time she got to the road that led to the Alagbaka market, the sun had risen higher. The shouts of traders, wheelbarrow pushers, and pepper sellers filled the air like music. As she stepped into the familiar chaos, the first woman who saw her gasped playfully. Ah, see, fine woman. Ronky, this your body day, Pepper-O. Another joined. You done turned celebrity. Your shape, they cause accidents. They laughed. She laughed too, but her laugh was softer than usual. Because behind the makeup and compliments, her vision had started to blur again. Her chest felt heavy, like she was breathing with half a lung. Her body screamed, turn back, go home, lie down. But her pride screamed louder. You've come this far, don't show weakness now. So she pushed forward, smiling, nodding, even stopping to price fresh tomatoes from Yibisi. But as she bent slightly to inspect them, the ground tilted, her ears rang. The voices around her became muffled. She blinked, her knees buckled. And the last thing she saw before her world went dark was Iyabisi's shocked face and her own hand reaching for balance that never came.